Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm talking about two topics that are pretty closely related. First off, my thoughts on Taylor Swift re-recording her classic album 1989. And I guess the bigger question is, why is she able to do it in a way that really kind of works, mostly works at least, where other artists have tried over the years and really kind of failed at re-recording their music? There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So unless you've been living under a rock the last couple of years, you know that Taylor Swift has been going through and re-recording her albums, at least her first 6 albums, the albums that she doesn't own the rights to. Her old manager had the rights to those albums, and then he sold them to a investment firm, so there's a dispute there. And in a way for her to get back or get ownership of those older albums, she's been going through and re-recording them. The Fearless was the first one, I think, and then she did Red, and then Speak Now, and then 1989 is the fourth in the series. And with the first 3 recordings of the series, I think she knocked it out of the park. I think she did a great job with those, with the new versions. I think that her more mature vocals kind of covers up or masks some of the flaws musically on some of the re-recorded versions. And like I said, if I'm going to sit down and pick or listen to those 3 albums, the first ones that she did in her re-recorded series, I prefer the re-recorded versions over the originals. She did a great job of bringing back a lot of the original people that helped create 1989. She's got Jack Antonoff back on here. She's got Ryan Tedder. Shellback, who did a lot of the music on the original version of 1989, is back on the re-recorded version to try to help recreate some of that magic that they had on that first album. So I think the big difference is the original version is produced by Max Martin. Max Martin is hands down one of the biggest and best pop music producers of the 2000s, has created some incredible music over the last 20 years. But she with this re-recorded series that she's done, Christopher Rowe has been the producer on all these re-recorded versions, and that's who produces this album here. And I think that's kind of, at least I think, going through and doing like an A/B comparison between the original and the re-recorded versions, I think the production side of it is kind of where this new version kind of falls flat. And that's one of the first things I did with this new version, was to take it and compare it side by side with the original version. I will tell you, like, right off, especially like the first 3 tracks on the album, there's a very big difference musically and production wise on both of those, on these 2 versions. And this is really the first time in this re-recorded series that she's been doing where I kind of prefer, it's not even kind of, I really do prefer the original versions over these re-recorded versions. I think the subtleties between the 2 versions, I think, are going to be lost on a lot of people. And I don't want this to sound snobbish or anything like that. It's just, I think of a lot of music fans out there really won't pick up on a lot of the differences between the 2. But there's definitely a very different crispness to the original version that just isn't there. The new version sounds kind of muddy, especially when you listen to it really loudly and really try to pay attention to the intricacies of the music. It just really isn't as noticeable on this new version as it is on the older one. Like I said, a lot of that's going to come down to production and mixing. And like I said, Max Martin is an absolute genius when it comes to pop music. And Christopher Rowe, he's done a good job on the last 3 releases. I just think that they just kind of missed the mark on this one. And I'm not saying there's a huge difference between the 2, but it is noticeable, I think, to people that have been listening to this album for almost 10 years. And like I said, if you really sit down and really listen to the 2 versions side by side, this new one almost sounds a little flat at times. It's a little compressed. It's not as clean and crisp as the original version. The original version just pops off the speakers when you listen to the album. This new version, it's almost there, but it just sounds like it's missing something. Sound-wise, I think both these albums sound great. They did a great job with them. They did a great job producing them. I guess kind of what it comes down to is 1989, the original version, is such a huge album. Like I said, I consider it one of the best pop albums of the 2000s, and a lot of people out there do also. So I think they're always going to have a hard time kind of matching that spark, that magic that they had on the original release. With some of the other re-recorded albums, I think Taylor's more mature vocals kind of mask some of the issues that I have with those albums, and that's why I prefer those re-recorded versions over the original versions. But with this one, her vocals really aren't that different on the two albums. And some of the issues I have with the music, like I said, the original version just kind of pops out the speakers, has a great sound to it. And while this new re-recorded version is really good, it's not quite up to the same level. But I guess I can't really argue with the results. I mean, if you go look at the Billboard Hot 100 right now, as of the time of recording this video, if you look at the top 10, 8 of the top 10 tracks are off of this album, off this re-recorded version. So, I guess you can't argue with the results that she's getting. I think she's one of those artists that can really put out anything, and it's going to sell a lot of copies. She's already shattering records with this one. It's already outsold the original version after release. So, I mean, like I said, with the issues I have with it, I think it's kind of a misstep on her part, but you can't argue with the results that they're getting with this release. But I guess that kind of brings me to the second part of the discussion, is why she's so successful at re-recording these albums when so many artists over the last couple of decades have tried to do the same thing. And, results have varied, but I'd say at best you get they're okay re-recordings. None of them ever equal the greatness of the original versions or even get close to it. I would say a vast majority of the re-recorded songs I've heard over the years just aren't great. But I think that a lot of that comes down to the style of music also. If you are re-recording a band, say Whitesnake, and you bring them into the studio, you can play the drums the exact same way, but, there's so many variables that go into recording live music in a studio that's never going to quite have that same sound as the original version. And then you take something like a synth pop album like 1989, where a lot of it's electronically driven. You got drum loops on there, and drum machines, and electronic instruments on there. I think you're always going to have an easier time trying to piece all that back together and recreate the original sound. And a lot of times it's going to come down to how it's mastered and how it's produced compared to the original. I'm not saying re-recording her music is an easy task. I'm sure it took a lot of hard work by a lot of people that knew exactly what they were doing to kind of recreate some of the sound from the original album. But I think there's a big difference between re-recording a synth pop album that's very electronically driven over a band in a studio. If you take any musician out there, Eric Clapton, if you take Eric Clapton and have him re-record some of his earlier music, even now it's the same guitarist in the studio. There's so many variables that go into the recording process that it's going to be hard to recreate that magic from a live in-studio musician. And that's why it's going to be really interesting to see what she does with an album like her self-titled debut album, where it was largely recorded with session musicians in a studio. So I think it's going to be an album where they're going to kind of have a hard time recreating the sound off the original album. So that's why I'm really interested to see what they do with that first album, with that one. But we'll see how it sounds. That's going to happen. She has her self-titled debut album and she has Reputation are the last two albums in this series that she's doing. But what she's doing isn't exactly new. I mean, there's been lots of musicians over the years that re-record their music, whether it's Whitesnake, Def Leppard, who else has? Tori Amos has, MXPX has. There's a long list of bands and musicians that have re-recorded their music. I think Goo Goo Dolls recorded Name for their Greatest Hits compilation. And while some of the songs are okay, I'm always going to prefer the original versions of those songs over the re-recorded versions. And that's why largely it's kind of the opposite with the stuff that she's been doing. So there's got to be something that she's doing that a lot of those artists aren't able to kind of recapture. And like I said, I think a lot of that kind of goes back to the way that the music for a lot of these songs and these albums are created originally. But I think this is something we're going to see less and less of moving forward. I was just reading just recently over the last week or so that a lot of the bigger labels are kind of revamping new signees contracts to where they can't do re-recorded music for a long period of time into the future, whether it's 10, 20, or 30 years out, that it bars the musician from kind of going back and recapturing the music and doing what Taylor did with these albums. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. I'd love to know what you guys think of this re-recorded version of 1989, how you think it compares to the original, and really what you think the difference is between what she's doing and what so many other artists out there have tried to do over the years, where they're trying to re-record their music. But like I said, let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.